Cindy, did everybody get those?
Yeah, those are in the agenda packet.
Yeah, I'm just going off the agenda here. There's two though.
Yes, we want to look at the pass through, it should say.
That's the one I was looking at right here.
Yeah, it's not showing up red for me. That's good.
Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't show up red. If you click on it, it goes away.
All right, so I guess because me and Cindy were going back and forth this week on this a little bit. All right, so going into, what'd you say, the double I section?
Yeah, so you said a permitted party is any co-locator, but if that's the case, then why is double I there? Any sublet or license from tenant to any communication provider which is not a permitted party or government entity shall be required and can blah, blah, blah. And I get back to my question original, who's a permitted party?
So I'm reading that as if we were to go and solicit people.
Well,
since we're the tenant.
No, we're not. We're not the tenant.
They're the tenant.
Verizon's the tenant here, but the double I think is going into the intention here, where if the additional provider can't utilize the existing space, and what they're talking about is the ground boxes. So if that can't fit on the base that we have or that Verizon has already installed, what they're saying is that we have to negotiate that independently with the co-locator.
Okay, that's fine.
So that's what that's what that's referencing.
But that's not what it says. I mean, you only know that because you had the conversation with James and David. Why don't they spell that out?
Well, as you've seen how many different options come back when I talk to this lawyer, he like turns it into a novel.
Yeah, it's a shame that they just don't simplify, because I think we're all in agreement, but that's not what the agreement really says. It's very convoluted, and he didn't get much better.
Because it does, yeah. So it says landlord may provide additional space, which is, I like may, because we could say no to it as well. Outside of the premise to the additional provider and negotiate independently with the additional provider for rental of that such portion of land. And if we would have to do that, so we would have an agreement whether we charge them $100 a month for that land lease, and then they're also paying Verizon co-location for their equipment on the tower, we would get to 25% there, which is further up in the top. But I mean, the way I read it or understand it is that Verizon's going to collect it. They're just not going to chase them down. But again, I think if there's an agreement with AT&T, Verizon's going to want their money for rent too. So they're going to chase their own rent. It's not like they would go back to them and say, oh, well, just give us 75% of it then. I don't know why they would do that.
I mean, they go too far to say the additional provider has agreed to pay tenant for the sublet of the premise.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't say the tenant then shall pay the landlord 25% of that fee.
You go up to where that 25% is written in parentheses.
Yeah.
So like that whole sentence there. So it says then landlord shall receive a sublet sum equal to 25% of the annual rental the additional provider has agreed to pay tenant for. So if AT&T agrees to pay $1,000 to Verizon a month, we're getting 25% of that. And it doesn't necessarily say from Verizon, but I think, wouldn't that just backtrack to our rent with them, like in a different section?
Logically speaking, that's the case.
Logically. Like, you see what she's saying and just why it doesn't, I mean, we could just make it simple and say it, right?
Yes.
I agree.
We all agree. Yeah, if it's outside the premise, yeah, we'll negotiate with whoever. If they're putting something on the tower, Verizon, you cover that, you do that, and give us 25% of whatever you get.
And
If they want a box next to what we're already, then that's a separate agreement that we would have to
That
come
we
to.
would-
just for the, just
Yeah.
for the
Yes.
ground lease, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was the whole understanding. And then this is what they came back with after that conversation. So I guess I'm reading it and then interpreting it
Because you know the.
for what
the
our
history.
intention is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
And
because
I get
that's
that.
from the last meeting, I went back to them and specifically said that, you know, this is what we wanted to say. And then this is what they came up with. So I guess, yeah, taking them at face value that they're not trying to trick us. I don't think it is, but I agree. They could just say additional provider has agreed to pay tenant for the sublease of the premise in which tenant will pay landlord. Like that's all you really need to put in there, right?
Yeah. Seems pretty straightforward. Maybe Dave should write it.
Well, I think I think the best way to handle it is just explain to Frank what we want and have him put some simplified language in there.
I think I'm past Frank on this one.
And
already
that's
now.
how I would handle it. If
Yeah,
we just tell him,
unfortunately.
Frank, we want to be paid for any sublease directly from Verizon.
I mean, I just,
Do they have a problem with that? They don't want to be like a debt collector for the other, is that kind of what they're trying to push back on? Is it,
well, we went through this, we went in like a circle on this when I was talking to this
this
James
whole
guy.
thing reads like that, like a circle.
Like, he basically said they don't want to be a property manager. And I'm like, that's fine. He's like, so like if the tenant defaults or if the additional provider defaults, he's like, we're not gonna try and collect that money for you guys. Like they don't want to do that. They don't want to waste legal money to collect it. And I'm like, well, for one, but then following that conversation or that sentence, he says that he's never seen that happen. Like where somebody defaults. And I'm like, well, okay, good. We're on the same page. So if you get money, we get money. Like,
If you don't get money, then we're,
yeah, I mean,
We're
we're not
both out.
right because we don't want to be in that negotiation for the co-locator.
Nope.
Like we want them to just do it. Like that's what they do. You do it and then you just give us the money.
yeah, well, and you know, if you're talking about $250 for like 3 months worth of like unpaid rent and then their service gets shut off, like, are you really gonna chase them down for $750? What's that gonna cost you to recoup that anyway?
Right.
So, I mean, if that's what they're putting in this, that they don't want to basically collect it if there's default, I'm okay with that because
Right.
eventually they get cut off. If we find somebody else that we put on there, you know,
I mean, we could very easily move forward and just say no co-location. And if they want to co-locate somebody, they come back and talk to us.
I was gonna say you could take that whole section out and just say any additional co-location, we'd have to have a new or like a sub agreement
Yeah.
for
Amendment,
that.
Yeah.
And to me, it made it seem like from prior meetings that they're not in the business of doing that anyway. So like this whole
You know,
back and forth on this section is kind of a moot point anyway.
Yeah, he kept saying that like Verizon wants this for themselves, but that they could co-locate.
Yeah, no one has service in that area.
So
Not Verizon, but
I would ask them what they would prefer, to leave it as is or have like a one sentence that says co-location must be approved at a further time. However you word it, but like basically we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
That's gonna wind up costing us more money in the long run, just because you gotta get the lawyers involved again.
Well, we'd have the same agreement. Yeah, I mean, you would,
It would just be an amendment
yeah.
to allow co-location.
would it be hard to, I just don't want this to move to like another meeting, basically is where I'm at. I'm at like the end of it here.
I mean, and then the other thing is number 10. I've got an issue with that too. I don't like the fact that we have to tell them to take the tower stuff down. We should not have to tell them. If the lease terminates, get your stuff out of there. Because like I told Dan, in 10 or 20 years, no one's gonna remember that's in there. That works the township. And so if everything is obsolete on the tower, they don't want the tower anymore. they're just gonna let that 10 days ride out and leave the stuff there, and then we have to get rid of it. Now, if it has some value to them, they'll probably get in there and
Oh, I
get
see
it
what you,
done.
yeah, within 10 days. Okay. So I see what you mean there.
But in 10, 20 years, you might not need towers. Who knows?
Right.
That just seems like a catch.
So you're saying you don't want that sentence in there about we have to give notice?
Yeah, she doesn't, yeah.
So you just want that out, like, if you're not gonna use it anymore, you gotta remove it.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think essentially just erase that whole thing and say within 60 days of expiration or early termination of this agreement, tenant
out.
agrees to,
Yeah.
a tenant will have their stuff out within that 60-day window.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that, the written request, cause
Why would you need it?
yeah.
Why would we have to do that?
Wow, that might be one where they're just saying, yeah, hey, if you don't give us the notice, then we might just leave that stuff there. I agree with you.
So no expiration, just upon written request, you have 60 days.
No, not even written requests. If the lease terminates or gets
Right.
out early,
Yeah, expiration or early
take the stuff out
termination.
in 60 days.
Tenant agrees to have all property aside from the
Slab.
foundation.
Yeah.
Removed within 60 days. Yeah.
I think we're good on that change. And if we go back to 6 and say, just take out all co-location requirements. If we want to if you want to co-locate, then come back and talk to us. We'll do an amendment.
I think that would be a pretty, I don't like to use the word rubber stamp, but I mean, the thing's already there. If they're just
Yeah.
Well,
attaching something else to the,
I mean,
I don't know why we would say no.
even if let's just go down a different road here. Let's say we approve this. That tower's not up until this time next year anyway. So like,
No, they got to go through zoning.
so like, could we approve it with these changes as an amendments or addendums to it?
I wouldn't do that.
Wouldn't do that.
No.
I just didn't know how easily that, because once you get it signed there, they'll be less likely to work with you.
Well, yeah. Why would they
Right.
want to work with you? Because they have a signed agreement.
I can appreciate you wanting to get this
Yeah.
back to them
Yeah,
and
it's
move the
a long-
process, but I think 6 and 10 with slight tweaks, they might have a big problem with that because maybe they have that written into all their contracts about the 10 days written notice, hoping that that is kind of like a catch where they can
Just abandon stuff.
walk away or depreciate it and not have to worry about it.
Let me, if it's okay with you guys, let me reach out to Dave and James, you talk to, and basically those two issues, 6 and 10. Simplified 6, or get rid of the co-location, and 10, get rid of the requirement that we notify them.
Anything else on here?
But I don't know that you want to prove anything tonight, unfortunately,
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you can't. So
unless you approve it conditioned on those changing, and then we could have the chair come in and sign the revised copy. I mean, you could do that. It wouldn't go to the Board of Supervisors till the 15th.
that's their next meeting.
There's one on the 1st, but I'm not allowed to use that agenda, particularly for a cell tower.
I have no problem approving it with those two conditions, but
And if we can get that back prior to the 5th and get it on their plate on the 15th, we can have it done by the 15th.
the only problem I have is with 6, if they have a problem with the co-location, then we're back here.
Well, they can either remove the whole section and we do an addendum later, or just say additional provider has agreed to pay tenant, in which tenant will pay landlord.
I don't think you can take the whole thing out because if you don't at least mention co-location in the agreement, they might then be able to do it without
Right.
I think the easier fix is just adding land and landlord into that sentence. Additional provider has agreed to pay tenant for the sublet of the premise. In turn, tenant will pay landlord their 25%. Because they say landlord shall receive it, just doesn't say that tenant is paying it. Or landlord shall receive from tenant a sublet sum equal to 25%. Right there, maybe. Landlord shall receive from tenant. Like that could be fixed with 2 words.
Then you still have 2I.
I think that whole section is just too busy and there's too much going on, and I'd rather.
Well, that the double I is referencing the additional ground lease if it was needed. I think that needs to be in there because we want to have authority to approve or not approve that, one, and also be able to charge for additional space leased.
I feel like that'd be a whole separate agreement though, if they need more land.
It would be a separate agreement with that co-locator.
Yeah.
Like they would have to rent that space. We charge them for that. And then they're still paying Verizon for the uses of the tower. And that's what Verizon pushed back on. They did not want to be part of the additional ground lease.
Which I get. Cause yeah, that's money for them that they don't necessarily.
Right. So that's what, I mean, they definitely pushed back on that portion of it.
I think the two of, or, you know, either Cindy or Dan, if somebody can reach out to them and just say, can we simplify this, or just say we're going to have to add it as an addendum, whichever you guys think is better.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's 2 requests, right? Landlord shall receive from tenant a sublet sum. So from tenant would be all we need in that section. Just specifically saying that the tenant is paying us that 25%. And then in number 10, yeah, just remove the written request.
Are we comfortable approving it conditionally without input from both Tom and Doug?
I haven't talked to Tom on it, but I'm sure we can email both of them an update to say, hey, these are the 2 portions that we are pushing back to them on, and see if they see anything else. I mean, it's pretty much the same. I mean, well, we've seen this 100 times already. Just
we're tweaking it, and that's, yeah, it's going back, and tweaking takes a month, and then it takes another month, and I get it.
They seem to have gone off on the outside of the premise criteria, and we were really focusing on inside the premise. And if that's the case, you owe us 25%. And they moved off to this off-premise deal. And
well, and that's because, like I said, they don't want to be the property manager for that. And maybe that's more where he was saying like default and this and that, like they're going to get their, because they can just shut the usage off of the tower for them, right? But if there's,
but then again, if something like that happens, Verizon would tell those people,
remove your equipment,
that, well, your stuff won't fit in our premise, so you got to go talk to the township to get another premise, and then you can use our tower. And then as part of that negotiation that we're doing with them, we would get 25%, I guess.
No,
That shouldn't even be in this agreement because it's outside of the Verizon agreement.
The only space that they would need would be to put their ground boxes.
Right.
So we would charge AT&T, we would develop a ground lease just for the ground space. And they pay us, like AT&T would pay us directly, just like Verizon would be paying us directly. The 25% will always go through Verizon because that's the charge that they're charging that tenant for space on the tower.
So an easier way of doing that is to say, if they cannot be within the premise, go talk to the township. If you're in the premise, the township is going to get 25%. or whatever the
Even if they're
co-locator pays.
outside the premise just for the ground boxes, we're still getting 25 for the tower.
We would, yes,
And we would get more for ground space too.
but they can't put that. They can't, they'd have to negotiate with the township first.
Right.
To get onto the tower. So it shouldn't even be part of this agreement. They shouldn't, Verizon shouldn't care what goes on outside their premise.
I think that's what I think that's why it's in here, because they're saying that we don't care what's outside.
When it's all said and done, is it really worth the very small amount of additional revenue we're gonna get by allowing another carrier to use the tower? And just say to the agreement, you're the sole one, that's it. I don't understand what the real, I see a little bit of financial loss directly, because we're not gonna get whatever dollars per month it's gonna be extra. But the time involved for bringing someone else aboard and everything else, it's gonna cost us money. And in the long run, I don't think it's worth it. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, it won't cost us any money if this agreement is correctly written and they're within the premise. It'll run smoothly. It's
If
gonna
they're
all be,
not, then it's gonna cost the township money.
no,
Okay.
if it's in the premise, this agreement should handle it.
If they need that where it says here, independently with the additional provider, where we would negotiate. I mean, again, when I was talking with James, like, I'm like, what kind of space are you talking about? And I don't think it's big. But.
And the township could just, or I say township, the authority could just say, not
Right.
worth our problem.
Because it says
Go ahead and go.
landlord may
Use
provide
it.
additional space. We could just say
Yeah.
no.
Yeah,
Figure
or
out how to
could
make
just
it.
say flat out no, yes.
Yeah. Figure out how to make it fit on.
Yeah.
On the slab that's there.
So I don't know where we're at this point with all that back and forth.
Well,
I would say I was comfortable with the conditional approval, but now I don't know what we're conditionally approving on 6. I think 10 is pretty
10,
straightforward
10's
as far
straightforward.
as like, the 10 days written notice. But, what do we want to do with the co-location?
I mean, this is just my opinion, but I'm comfortable with it as long as we get landlord shall receive from tenant a sublet sum equal to 25%, so that it just reiterates that the tenant is providing or paying us that 25%. I'm okay with that section, the double I section, because I think that that's Verizon's way of saying we're not going to guarantee or negotiate additional land outside of their agreement with us.
You could also just change it to 25% of collected rent. So if they don't collect the rent from the other co-location,
Yeah.
then
There's so many ways to make this easier.
yeah, that's it. I don't.
It's
Yeah.
3 paragraphs that, or 2 paragraphs that could have been a couple sentences.
Because I get they don't want to collect, go to collections for $300 payment, So I'd be comfortable conditionally approving it if they would simplify this to spell that out. But I also don't know how to put that into words for a vote. Because that's pretty gray. Do you think that you could have a conversation with them, get this simplified, and then can we?
I mean, Dan tried. I mean, that's how I went into the conversation is we need this simpler.
Yeah.
And this is what they came back with.
Well, and it took him 3 weeks or so to even get that back. Even though I think I talked to him, meetings are on Wednesdays. I probably talked to him on a Thursday. And he said he would have it by the weekend, and then it took 3 weeks.
So I'm not going to call for a vote, but what's everybody comfortable with? Because at this point, it's just us here. Tom and Doug aren't here, so how do you want to proceed with it?
I won't vote for the amendment with having them have another tenant. I think it should just be them and that's it. I think that truly is the best for us in terms of hassle for the additional revenue we're going to get yearly. So I would not approve that. I would not vote for that unless it's a single tenant and that's it. But I'm only one voice out of 6 or 7.
Well, right now you're 1 out of 4, so it doesn't help us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we table it. And if they come back with the fixes, can we circulate that vote through email to approve it for the 15th for the board meeting at least?
Yeah, I would think so. You'd probably have to ratify it at your November meeting.
Yeah, let the board ratify it there, and then we just do it the following week, right?
That way the board could take action before December. Yeah.
So maybe you tell them the timeline of that so they can get this back and we can get it circulated before
if they
that
can
meeting.
figure out how to just specify what we want there and remove that written requirement in number 10 and get it back to us, we can have it approved at the 15th and then approved at our 21st meeting. Well, we don't have to make any decision here.
Okay. Anything else on the cell phone tower? I'll move down to blue collar. From our last discussion, we talked about the snack bar operations.
Jim had some positive comments, maybe he'll share with you regarding his recent interaction with blue collar that might alleviate some of your concerns. Hello, Jim. Well, that would be terrible if they can't hear us.
Jim, can you hear us? You're on mute if you're trying to talk.
I checked ahead of time. Speaker should be on. Oh, those are correct.
Can anybody hear us out that are on the Zoom?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, but I can hear you also.
John or Tim, do you have any insight into how blue collar is functioning, integrating into the snack bar versus pro shop?
Yeah, so they started selling hot dogs up in the restaurant. We also get sandwiches twice a week down for the pro shop. So I mean that's been going pretty well. Brittany's been easy to work with. We used blue collar for our club championship this weekend. Everything went really smoothly. So yeah, we really don't have any complaints. A lot of the golfers are kind of understanding what's going on with it being closed for the winter. So I mean, it's been good for now.
I think they hired a new manager, Heather or Heidi.
I haven't met Heidi. The only person I work with is Brittany.
Jim had mentioned the new manager and that seemed to be working better in terms of communicating and meeting the needs of the golfers.
Yeah, I think we kind of finally have a relationship with them. You know, most of their workers we get along with too, so that's definitely helped recently.
Thanks, John.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Any questions or follow-up comments on blue collar? I'll move down to Finance and Operations Committee, the budget to actual report. So I was taking a look at this, and Gina, I wanted to ask you a question on something I saw on here that, just pull it up. It was the cash payment. This is, you want me to draft here? It was like 142,000, I think, on the page 3 of the 2024. So golf equipment loan payment to general fund, $142,812. It's at the bottom. It's like the 4th or 5th number from the bottom.
That is for the golf carts and the equipment that Joe had purchased in 22 that didn't come in until the middle end of 23.
How many of those payments are there?
Will be 4 total.
Okay. Starting.
The first payment was made, I think this is the second of 4 payments.
In 2023 or in
2023.
Okay. So we'd only have 2 more.
Yep.
One in 2024 and 2025.
I believe that is.
Are you on the budget or the?
I'm on the
actual?
2024 not that one.
Draft.
Yep, it goes through 2025. So there is the 4th payment will be paid in 2025.
Okay.
And then that will be done.
And then the other question that I just had when I was looking at this is there's a line item for 55,000 for golf course maintenance. What encompasses that 55,000 roughly? Like because I'm looking at some of the other items on here, and there's, you know, other maintenance, and that one was kind of, it didn't really have any details on what it was.
Joe, can you help out with that?
Yeah, that's for the tree removal that
Okay.
we'll do in the winter. There used to be a separate line for tree removal when I first started, and then a couple of years ago we just incorporated it into the golf course maintenance and increased the budget there. Just because of the tree removal, for hazardous tree removal, and for like all the stump grindings.
So that's a contracted third party that gets paid 55,000 to do that?
No, not the whole 55,000. Last year it was probably, I'm not sure exactly, probably close to 38 to 40,000 that we used out of the 47,000. Because that's what we used for the trees, and then the rest of it, it's all for, it goes towards the SRBC payments for the water usage, and it goes for all of the accessories for the golf course that I buy annually.
Okay. I know we're going to meet in November to go through a lot of this in detail, but that was a couple of things I just saw when I was cruising through this. But
yeah, I had met with the township last week and asked the same question about the golf course maintenance, and that was the bulk of it. Was the tree removal.
Tree removal.
So I was satisfied with it.
Yeah,
as far as understanding what was going on.
Yeah, and actually, the guys I work with, they're really affordable. I've used them now probably for, probably at least 6 years, maybe 7, since I've been there. First year or two, we actually used the township. Public Works would come over and help and then it become kind of, it was just too much. And then we started, I found this company, was actually, Harper was Harper, he was the original one, and then he sold his company to, they call themselves the Woodsman. They're out of Elizabethtown, and they're very affordable. And then Harper still comes in, and he does the stump grinding for us and the cleanup.
Okay. Yeah, and then I looked at the long range projections, and I saw the steep drop off in total revenues, but I guess that's because we had the money come over from the golf fund in 2023, but obviously that's a one-time
thing,
deal.
yeah.
So, but I'll open it up for other comments. That was just a couple of my initial, just from looking at the numbers.
Well, we had the meeting last week. Basically, I'm comfortable with what's projected. Jim made a point of saying that he always wants to try to underestimate the revenue and be conservative, and then really try to watch the expenses. So I'm comfortable with what has been proposed from a preliminary standpoint. Cindy and Gina and Diane all answered all the questions that I had. So
I do have a couple changes. And at the November meeting, actually before the November meeting, I'll be emailing everything out so you have an updated copy, but there are a couple of changes. The first one is in the golf course operations, health, life, disability, and workers' comp insurance. That one actually went up by $5,000 because of the opt-out amount has been changed. So I didn't account for that in the initial budget. So that number is now $67,189. And then, excuse me. There's also a slight change on the health insurance for the maintenance. This one's just minor. It actually was overestimated or underestimated by $40. So that one is now $73,042. And the pension did not calculate the $1,000 estimated in overtime. So that is now $12,325. So those three numbers are different, and I will be sending an updated copy, but for the most part, everything else is as it's represented.
So in the long range projections, it says 1% growth for greens fees, rental power carts, and all other golf operation revenues. But if I look at the numbers from 2023 to 2024 and beyond, it's lower. That's
because it's such a hard number to actually guess at.
So you're just looking at 2024 to 2025 would be 1% growth.
Yes.
But we didn't use that from 2023 to 2024.
Correct. We tried to estimate with, I worked with Jim to try to come up with a number that he expected, considering what the weather's projected to be, and it's
Friends.
It is what it is, whether or not the fees will go, the difference in the fees that are becoming, and like Cindy said, the trends. So we worked on the 2024 number, and then going out further, it's just an estimate, and we wanted to be conservative.
Yeah.
Now we do have a couple pieces of equipment out there, and 24 has one, and then there's one in 26. So the one in 26 and 24, we looked at combining those at one point and leasing them. The cost of leasing them is $30,000. Didn't make sense to us. So you see them now marked out separately. However, the one in 2026 has an 18-month lead time. So we'll be coming back to you in 24 to ask permission to commit to that one, so it arrives in 2026.
What is it? I'm just curious.
A 450D. Joe, can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, it was back to 25 and 26 that was going to be combined. That was going to be the sprayer in 25, And then the 4500D is the grounds master. That's the main rough unit that we use, which we actually have one. They purchased one in 2016 and we've been using it since. But it's been nickel and diamond. It's a good bit. We've put a lot of money into it the past couple of years. And again, like Cindy said, it's a minimum of 18-month turnover to get one. So now we're looking at getting one in 26. So I'm going to keep putting the Band-Aids on the one we have to get us that far. Again, that's the rough unit. And so in 25, which is already ordered, that's going to be the sprayer that'll come really late 24 or right at the beginning of 25. I told him it basically couldn't be here till 25 regardless. And then for 24 on your sheet, I was asking for, it's an X mark. It's another one of our rough units. It's a 0-turn machine that we use for all the, like, kind of the secondary rough, like all in between the trees. So we have so much tree, so you need a 0-turn to get around everything. It basically does everything that the 4500D does not do. And that I was asking for that for 24. I think it's 22,000 and change.
Okay.
The split out of that 92, that's 60,000 for the parking lot, 22 for the mower, and then there's 10 in there for plow attachment for the truck that is going to be leased sometime towards the middle of the year. So when that will need the plow attachment for Joe and his crew to clear the parking lot. So that's what makes up that 92 for 2024.
So I don't think I'm prepared to adopt this at tonight's meeting.
No.
So, but just wanted to get any feedback. And where are we at with the parking lot at this point? Because that was kind of tied to the deck, which that's still up in the air as well.
I believe the deck is done because we told them to come back if you're interested in pursuing it, and they have not. The parking lot, I believe Blue Collar would like the extra space for a parking lot. We'll ask Jim, but instead of paving it, we're looking at using millings from Church Street, which is going to happen next year. PennDOT's going to give us those, put them in the parking lot, and then just lay them out. It'll turn into fairly flat surface.
Okay.
But to do that, we have to do something with stormwater because we're expanding the parking lot. Currently, the engineer is looking at how to do that. I'm not too happy with how long it's taking him or how much it's costing. So we have a meeting with him on Friday to talk about it.
I saw that in the budget line, and I completely forgot about that because we haven't talked about the deck.
Yeah, we started at 180 to pave it and backed it down to 60. And if we get the free millings, then it's really just township labor and whatever we have to do for stormwater.
Got it.
So it's likely going to be less than 60, but it's in there now. Jim, do we still need an expanded parking lot? John, do we need an expanded parking lot? Jim, it doesn't count if you don't answer.
Honestly, I don't know. Jim said he was back on. He was away for a minute, but I'm honestly not sure.
Jim, are you there?
Yeah, ideally, it would be nice to have the additional parking for when we're full, because right now it's even getting tight when we have a tournament or just a busy day. And the restaurant's going, so the additional parking would benefit both.
So what's the timeline on that? Is it over the winter? Or is it start of the next?
Probably going to be early spring. We'll get the stormwater straightened out, hopefully Friday, and
They're going to pave Church Street.
Church Street's not
Thanks.
happening till probably in the spring.
After school's out.
Yes. Well, no. Yes. Sorry. Yes. My final answer. Yes.
All right.
So you're looking Jim.
Yeah.
Any other budget questions, comments? I'm going to move on to the cash requirements.
This is one you'll notice it's pretty high for what the rec authority is paying the township. We do have the 2023 loan payment of 143, just under 143,000. And then the second and third quarter for the admin and public works contracted services. That was not billed in the second quarter, so that second and third quarter. But I am going to be, you'll see that the money is still sitting in the golf fund, and that's going to be changed over probably within the next month. That'll all come into the rec authority.
Might be a silly question. Is there any reason that we don't just pay payment every month instead of $142,000 in 1 month? Like, would that help
I
any?
can have it set up however you would like it.
I'm just talking to the greater, like, is there any reason that we?
Gets a little tight in the winter months.
In the winter months, there's just less revenue.
But
And that's why we timed it in the first payment. It was done end of October, beginning of November, just because that's when the funds were there.
Flush, yeah.
And that's kind of the timing that we have right now, where the funds are there. So we thought this would be a good time to do just the one payment. And since there's only 4, if we time it, when the funds are there.
Makes it easy. Yeah, that's fine. I just figured I'd ask. It's a big
Unless you
number.
wanted to do it, 2 payments a year. I mean, we can do it however you want to do it, quarterly, whatever you feel is the best way to do it. I'm certainly willing to work with that, but that is the logic behind why it was done once a year.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm fine with keeping that. I just was curious. What's David Miller Associates?
engineer.
EMA.
Mm-hmm.
Something over there.
Okay,
That's who you're dealing with for the stormwater.
Yes.
Yeah.
it's a big number.
Yeah, that's why I'm not happy.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about the cash requirements?
Nope.
I'd ask for a motion to approve the cash requirements.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the cash requirements, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Approved. Moving down to old business, golf operations update. Jim, you have anything you want to add?
Nah, nothing to add for it's just been another good month and everybody's doing a great job. Course is in great shape.
Anybody have any questions for Jim?
Extra rounds that month.
Apparently 2024 is supposed to be a lot of snow. I don't know if there's any science behind that, but that might be that's what I read somewhere. Thank you, Jim. Goals, objectives for the golf course.
The rec authority asked both Joe and Jim to provide goals. I got some from Joe. So I'm sure Joe will provide those to you next month.
Okay. Anybody have anything to add on goals, objectives for the golf course? I guess for next year, we'll pick back up the zoning for the front lot. I think that was something we kind of put on the back burner.
Right.
So I guess going forward, that'd be something that we would re-engage in if we feel it's appropriate. New business, vacancy on our board with obviously Mike stepping down. So Cindy, did you want to add anything on that or?
We have received 2 applicants. We put it out on social media, our website. Of course, you probably remember Bob Crimmel's name. He was the former township manager. And then we have another applicant, Ted Romick. So I didn't know what process you wanted to have. Typically, boards and commissions have held interviews and then made a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. It's just one more step, but it might help to meet these people.
Could you send us their resumes so we can look at them?
I think you have them.
In the agenda.
Yeah.
I didn't look at the entire package, so.
Okay. So just ask the board to.
Well, I wanted to chime in on this one. I wanted to see if you guys wanted to come up with a plan for the future, because I'm announcing my resignation from the authority effective at the end of this meeting.
Hear you.
My job right now with my responsibilities doing more political writing is a conflict. I'm afraid there's some conflict of interest for me working for a public authority and being in meetings where I'm hearing things that typically media members would not. So I'm going to be stepping down.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to Jim and staff for all your good work. The course is wonderful, and kudos to all of you. Thanks to Ryan for your leadership, Dan and Dave for your good work, Cindy for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, for everything you've done.
Thank you.
And we will miss you for sure. Well, I guess it's already on the agenda for vacancy, but
That might make your life easier.
Well, we have 2 applicants.
yeah.
And Mr. Romick does look like a very viable candidate based on his resume. He's a physical education teacher. Basketball coach.
Just talking out loud, I don't think having them come to a meeting and do like a presentation during our meeting would be the best forum for that. Would we set up like separate meetings or have like a non-board meeting where we would, meet them all or meet one of them together? Similar to, I think when we all interviewed, we came to the township building and.
It has to be a public process.
So it has to be at a public meeting, but that wasn't. Was that because it was the formation of the? It
was actually publicized, but it typically people don't attend.
Okay.
So what you could do is maybe do it for an hour before, an hour after. Not even that, half hour, probably 15 minutes just to invite them. And after your meeting closes, and just make sure you close the meeting. Or earlier, either way, it doesn't matter. But then we would advertise that meeting starting at 6:30 or starting at 7:30, whatever it might be.
Before our rec authority meeting.
Before or after.
Okay.
That would be easiest for you, the members, because you're coming here anyway.
Yeah.
Just coming a little earlier. We would also invite the Board of Supervisors, since they would probably want to also meet these people. Well, they know Bob, but Mr. Romig.
Okay. How quickly do you think we want to do that? Like at the next meeting or 2024?
You're down 2 members.
2 now, yeah.
You still have a quorum to meet at 4. So depends what November looks like.
Yeah.
We want to continue the advertising to see if we can get any more potential applicants.
I can put it back out. I closed it on the 16th, but that doesn't mean anything. We can certainly.
So if we put it back out there and then also invite those interested for the November meeting. And
we'd have to schedule them, but yeah.
Well, it would just be the day that our meeting is, right? So if it doesn't work for them, then we'd have to find another meeting time and publicize that.
Right.
Well, let's do this. I have not looked at their resumes yet either. So why don't we both or all of us look at the resumes, send out any comments, and then I would say next week, reach out to them if we decide that we want to go through that with them, with each candidate, and then see if they're able to come to our November meeting. And if they're not, then we'll have to work from that.
Did you want to do the interviews during the meeting or before the meeting or?
Well, that's what maybe I'm confused by that. So do the interviews have to be in a public meeting, or we have to? Okay, so.
So if you start your interview process at 6:30, I would advertise that as start of your meeting.
Yeah.
For interviews, and then your regular meeting would start at 7.
Okay.
Now, if we have 4 applicants, then it gets a little tight. 3, you can probably do 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And they would just be like, we would interview him standing there and the other guy's just sitting there.
Usually we ask the applicants to stay outside, wait outside.
Does that defeat the public purpose of it?
Yes. Oh, they could come in, and if they insisted, they could.
Okay.
It's a little awkward.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, we even have a form now that people sign to tell them that this is a very public process, and they have to understand that.
Well, I mean, I just think that if you're interviewing 2 people in the same room, that
it's odd. Yeah.
The first person that answers, that's going to be the answer for the second guy too.
Wouldn't that fall under personnel decisions though, where you could go to executive session?
No. Not for a public entity like this. According to our attorney, they have to be public.
When we were interviewed for this positions, that wasn't at a public meeting.
Well, there was no board yet.
It wasn't
or there wasn't an authority, right?
It was before the Board of Supervisors, likely. I can't remember. And it was probably an advertised meeting. Again, people don't usually come to those.
I remember meeting in the conference room back there.
That's where we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in the back
One
conference
at a
room.
time. We got scheduled our times.
But
well, then we got away with that one.
Yeah, but that was prior to the board being in existence. Because you were interviewing for a position for the board, but there was no board yet.
Right.
So it was Board of Supervisors that were there. They were interviewing.
But if the
personnel
Board of
decision.
Supervisors was there, it should have been a public meeting.
But that's a personnel decision from the Board of Supervisors. That was basically almost like an executive session. I don't remember how many supervisors and who was in the meeting when we were interviewed.
I don't even remember meeting in.
It was Doug, Tom.
Yeah, I remember Doug being in there.
Oh, what was this?
Scott was there.
Scott was there.
Yep. Yeah, there was a group, but
Bob Krimmel might have been there, obviously.
I mean, I'm okay with having them come in. I guess we can invite them in. At least to talk, we can talk to them and then we can make our decision after the fact. We can make our decision in executive session, right? No.
So that would just be an agenda item as an action item on our agenda. So they could, they could stay for the meeting and hear our feedback.
Honestly, I think if someone wanted to be obnoxious enough to sit here while you were interviewing the other candidate,
Yeah, but
that might tell you all you need to know about whether or not you want to add them.
And I've never had that happen.
Yeah,
I
I find that hard to believe.
I don't think we should get ourselves where that might potentially happen. I think an interview is to be considered private, a personal matter. I would not want to feel comfortable interviewing someone at this meeting, at a session like this, with the other applicants in the room. I don't feel that's appropriate.
I can get an attorney to tell you differently, but that's what we've been doing. It's a very public process.
Wow. Yeah. I think we're making this a big deal. I think that we invite them in and we clearly, say, hey, you're more than welcome to wait outside if you want to for the first one, whoever shows up first.
Oh, we asked them to, and then if they insist on coming in, well.
Yeah, then they can, sure, if you want.
It's a good indicator. See what you're causing, Steve?
And it might, once again, it might be all you need to know about the second candidate if they cause you heartache.
Right.
So
unnecessary heartache.
Let's review the resumes and plan on interviewing them at 6:30 Wait, I'm not gonna be at our next meeting.
Oops.
I'm gonna be in Florida.
I'm not gonna be at that meeting either.
So I don't even know if we can have a meeting then.
Well, we would not be able
Don't have
to.
a quorum.
Yeah,
I mean, I might be able to attend remotely.
I mean, we don't have to do it meeting night. It's just easier for you.
yeah. But do we have to move the meeting then or cancel the meeting if I'm not gonna be there?
You'd have to cancel.
Dave's not gonna be there. Steve's stepping down.
And this is on Tuesday, the 21st.
Yeah, I'm gonna be away that whole week, so
It's a difficult week.
yeah.
And that would be approving that lease, hopefully too. So we would need somebody to jump on the Zoom to,
And I really hate to
Give
crush
us a
things here,
quorum.
but the December meeting, either Gina or I will be here.
But we were trying not to have that anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But again, we could schedule a meeting. It just requires advertising.
can we change our November meeting or is it too far out to do that?
Tell me when it works. I'll get the ad in the paper.
I would say the Wednesday before, but I'm not in front of my calendar, but. So let's read the resumes and maybe we can figure out was it just that day that didn't work or that whole week for you?
or was the board
Wednesday
super.
before.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be there either, so.
Yeah, you couldn't do a Wednesday
Wednesdays are not open.
unless you did it earlier.
The 15th, yeah, the 15th is when the board of supervisors will be meeting.
Here,
Would it make more sense to do it the week following, like the 28th?
but this Board of Supervisors, isn't it every other Wednesday that they,
First and third.
First and third.
first and third? Let's go back over email and figure out a date, because I'm not in front of anything personal or work to see if it would work. But we're gonna have to reschedule that meeting either way, because we got stuff we gotta complete in it, and obviously we're not gonna be able to do that with 3 people, so. Okay,
Well, you can do what you've done before, Cindy, and just send us an email saying what are your available dates, and we can respond back and then go from there.
all right. Any other new business or input on the vacancies? Minutes from the previous meeting. Anybody have any questions or comments for the minutes? I will make a motion to approve the minutes from September 27th.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? So we have to have somebody else. If Steve's abstaining, we only have,
I was not
If
present at
you-
the meeting.
If it. Well, you could abstain and still have enough to vote.
for 3?
Yeah, it would be
Okay.
3-0 to 1.
Okay.
Yep.
So the minutes are approved. Any public comment? Executive session is not needed. I'd make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Cindy, is there anything else that you need from me?
And the girl outside of Beverly Hills is on right now, season premiere.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.